developments. There are structural changes occurring in the housing construction industry involving new players. I've heard of instances where bats get taken out of one building and put in another.
Councillor, we're just straying a little bit. We're just getting a wee bit detailed, and I am Councillor. Councillor, just stop for a second. Just shush for a moment. We have had certainly some very strong feedback in the last few days around keeping our meetings absolutely focused on the issue in hand. Your point's well made, but we don't need to go into detail. So do you want to wrap up your question?
Sure. So the long-term cost of Shonky development, and also arguably lack of maturity around body corporate development that impacts significantly in cost long-term around apartments and so on. So just 3 questions there.
To the Chair, yes, Auckland has high cost of construction, as does the rest of New Zealand, and that has been an area of focus for public policymakers for some time now. And I draw upon the background on that, and also try to contribute by escalating and raising some areas for further consideration that might have gone off the radar of some. On the market structure, I did not analyse in my report in market shares of different parts of the supply chain and the like. I talked at a very high level about the issue generally and how that public policy people can tackle it. And one of my options related to the possibility of central government developing at scale and looking to have that in mind on long-term development and the quality of building. That is an ongoing challenge, particularly as Auckland grows and has the scale. I'll touch on some of the exacerbating features of indirect areas of wider public policy, such as relating to our liability rules that might cause the structure to be more fragmented, which makes it harder to do project management. And if it's harder to do project management, it's therefore much harder to do quality assurance. And so the council is sort of wearing that, and so I'll highlight that. Body corps, I didn't touch on that at all, but that can probably be picked up in a broader thing about how people can understand what the whole of life costs are of ownership. And
I'd also add, I think the 25% productivity improvement target strongly suggests that construction costs need to be looked at. So.
Okay, I know we've had a lot of questions. I know Councillor Quacks, you were wanting to speak to the recommendations. I think we're pretty much there.
Yeah, just very briefly, Madam Chair, and it's really been a worthwhile discussion. And my own observations of the report, and you know, it almost seems like we're now we are going to go for a medium multiple of 5, and I suspect that will be unless we have some real structural changes by both the government on the demand side, especially. I think the government leads that on the demand side, and so those are things that we have no control over. The areas that we can pull some levers are on our planning in terms of supply side. That's really important, and also our own regulations. And in terms of expensive to build, and Councillor Walker just mentioned that it's not just the cost of building that is expensive, and especially when you start to develop within brownfields area, there are other considerations which also add to the costs, and those are usually things like fragmented ownership of sites, which can take an awful long time to bring the sites together. That all costs money, and so that adds to the costs. And we know that it actually, for a developer, it is more expensive to build in a brownfield situation than it is in a greenfield situation, simply because there's not those constraints around the supply. In terms of, you know, and I want to focus on this, Madam Chair, again, that we have now enabled a huge amount of land for redevelopment. I think at last count it was close to 900,000 enabled sites or enabled houses, but because of the market constraints, the latest evidence to the independent hearings panel showed that the market feasibility is less than, or around about 10% of that. So in other words, we've enabled 800,000 or 900,000 dwellings, or the ability to build dwellings, but in actual fact, only 92,000 of those, or around about 100,000 of those, have market feasibility. So we've got a real problem here, and that can only, and if we want to address the supply side within the mull, then we have to make some real difficult decisions which will require huge political resilience. And for many of us, if those decisions are made, it will cost us politically. No question about that, because we will see a much greater, we will see heritage sites no longer there. Volcanic view shafts will have to be omitted, and Chris has put in his report how much volcanic view shafts, the economic value of those are. So there are some real challenges facing us, and I suspect that we can get a lot more than 100,000 within the MUL, but nowhere near the 280,000. So therefore, we've got to start thinking about what amount of land has to be developed outside the mull, and so that is something that we really need to turn our minds to if we are going to be able to meet that target of a medium house price being a multiple of 5 of the medium income. It's going to be very, very difficult unless we are prepared to make some real changes. And I suspect that the real change here will be supply. To a lesser extent, it will be the productivity gains that can be made in the building industry, the cost of some of those products within the building industry. But as long as we continue to have an undersupply, we will be stuck with this housing affordability. And I just want to, I know that Jim said, oh, you know, this is prevalent everywhere. I think that's what you said, Jim. I hope I haven't mistaken.
I'm not sure I said that, but it's about.
I just want to remind councillors that no, housing doesn't have to be as expensive as it is in terms of income as it is in Auckland. And just recently I sent a whole bunch of website links to councillors to have a look at what some other cities around the world, what housing costs there, and then compare them to the costs in Auckland. Yep. And the one common thread in terms of housing affordability in those cities is that there is a flexible supply of land to meet demand. Unfortunately, through our planning, we have not had.
Councillor, can I just do a little time check with you? This has been quite a long lead up to your opinion. I know.
You would pull me up.
Councillor, again, I think we've had a lot of critics around this table, yourself included, about the time that meetings take. Let's just focus back on what needs to happen at this meeting, and in the time between now and the report back in February. This is exactly the work that we'll be doing, as well as I commend tomorrow's unitary plan workshop to you, where much of this will also be brought up, as well as the unitary plan meeting next week. So I'm not endeavouring to stifle debate. I'm simply saying this discussion is ongoing, and if you could draw your remarks to a close.
Absolutely, Madam Chair. So the common thread, and I'll come to a close, the common thread is those cities who have imposed strict land supply policies are those cities that are having trouble with affordability. Those cities who haven't applied those kind of policies don't have those problems, and I suspect as well they don't have many of the social problems that we are now seeing prevalent in Auckland and will continue to get worse. And Chris, thank you for drawing our attention not just to the economic side of this housing affordability problem, but also the very severe social problems that come with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Quacks. I think we've reached the end of the discussion. We'll move to the recommendations A, B, C and D, and I'm happy to put those. All those in favour please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much, and thank you both again for your work. It is hugely appreciated.
Thank you.
And the next few months, I think this is when we unpack it and get into the kind of detail that Councillor Quacks is asking for. So we move now on to